Good afternoon, but welcome to our ESC webinar. We're glad you're here. My name is Kelly Calloway. I'm Senior Director of Instructional Materials, and I will be joined in this presentation by several other people. Let me give you a brief rundown of the agenda for the webinar. We're going to start with some introductions. So I've already introduced myself, and in a few minutes we'll be asking you to introduce yourself. Then we'll do a brief talk about law and rule and what law and rule says and requires of education service centers regarding instructional materials. And then Amy will talk to you in a much more specific way about samples and timelines. We'll do a brief, very brief overview of the Texas Resource Review. And finally, we hope to have a presentation, a brief presentation for you from Learning Ally, and I'll give them a more thorough introduction when we get to their section of the presentation.
Thanks, Kelly, and hello, everyone. As Kelly said, I'm Amy Williams, Director of Review and Adoption, and I'm just going to ask you all, who will soon be unmuted, to start with ESC 1, and then we'll just go in order through the roll call, and you can answer those 3 questions. And then as you complete your response, if you can just mute yourself again, that'll prevent a lot of the background noise that we might hear.
Okay, thanks, Amy. And thank all of you for being here. It sounds like we have a nice mix of new and experienced, but I can assure the experienced people that this year is going to be new anyway. We are learning new things about pre-K systems almost daily up here, and so they are a completely different animal than we've been working with for the past several years. But we're going to proceed, and Amy will get into all of that, but we're going to proceed with what you need to know that you're required to do by law and rule. We're going to be talking about the Texas Education Code. Chapter 31 is all about instructional materials, and the Texas Administrative Code, which is the board rules to implement the Texas Education Code, and all of the board rules that affect instructional materials and your duties toward instructional materials are in Chapter 66. Those rules were very recently amended, revised with several new things, but if I recall right, and Amy can always jump in and correct me, and she knows that if I say something wrong, I don't think anything in those rules changed regarding ESC duties. Sometimes we do some language cleanup, but actual duties did not change for ESCs. The TEC requires publishers to provide you with an electronic sample of each submitted instructional material. For those of you who were in our TETN that we had, I don't remember, maybe year before last, sometime in the not too far past, we encouraged you to just link to our electronic samples of those instructional materials to make your lives easier. Unfortunately, that's not going to work for pre-kindergarten materials because of the nature of the materials and the inclusion in those materials of manipulatives, for example. They really can't be provided online, and so that requirement is a moot point for this particular proclamation, but it'll come into being for you again with Proclamation 2022. Make sure I didn't accidentally skip a slide there. The Texas Administrative Code requires publishers also to provide an electronic sample to each ESC, and this is new language. It requires that samples of pre-kindergarten materials, instead of being electronic, match the format of the products to be provided to schools upon ordering. So what you will get If our previous experience with pre-kindergarten systems is any indication, what you will get are giant boxes full of stuff. And you're right, whoever said something about the logistics of managing those boxes, it is going to be a challenge. And it'll be a challenge that is different for each ESC. I can also assure you that it will additionally be a challenge for us here at the agency, because we have to store those samples as well. 66.39 describes your specific responsibilities related to handling and providing public access to samples. The primary point of your having these samples is so that the public can view the samples while they're under consideration for adoption, and hopefully, and so it will be a more challenging job this year because the public will need to physically visit the agency or one of your ESCs in order to see the instructional materials. During the instructional materials review, and what often happens is that the review panel discovers that there are certain elements of the TEKS, or in this case, the Texas Pre-Kindergarten Guidelines, that are not covered and that the publisher will not be getting credit for. But under certain circumstances, the publisher is given the opportunity to provide new content or new correlations so that hopefully they can get credit for that content. So during the course of the review, we tend to get a lot of new content. We post that new content to the website if it's been approved by ESCs. We do not know what that new content might look like this year. It may be that it comes in a format that is still postable, and you don't have to deal with physical copies of that new content. But frankly, we're going to have to just wait and see what that new content looks like. But the publishers will be required to provide you with all of that new content, as well as to provide it to us. And now we're going to talk about those samples that everybody is a little leery of this year, and I'm going to hand the microphone back over to Amy.
Thanks, Kelly. One of the main reasons we wanted to have this meeting is to discuss your role in providing public access to those samples being considered for adoption or adopted by the SBOE. And as many of you have mentioned, it's a whole new world for pre-K. So let's just dive right in. As Kelly mentioned, publishers are required to send materials being considered for adoption and other related documents to each ESC at a specific time. And I realize that you guys can't see my screen. There we go. All right. Sorry, technical difficulty. It's always me. So this includes an electronic sample for K-12 material or a sample in the format that'll be provided to districts for pre-K materials. They're also going to send you correlations, which are Excel files that identify where in the materials the publisher believes each of the student expectations are addressed. If the publisher makes any edits to the materials during the public review period, they may wish to provide you with an updated version of the pre-adoption sample. Especially for the electronic samples, it's important to note that they can do that, but they have to keep the original version intact and available during the entire public review period. So you might end up with two versions of the pre-adoption sample. And following the review, like Kelly mentioned, publishers have to send you copies of any new content that they provided to the state review panels that was approved. We require that the publishers make their materials available during the review and adoption process to ensure that Texans have an opportunity to review them and provide feedback to the SBOE. These pre-adoption samples should not be used or reproduced without the publisher's permission. All the pre-adoption samples for K-12 courses must be electronic, and we will post them to our website until the materials are adopted at the November meeting. You're encouraged to provide access to those samples by linking to our website, but you may still need to provide people with the resources they need to review the samples. So we'll talk more about this later, but that's why we still ask for you to provide us with the instructional materials viewing hours, because you might have someone who either doesn't have sufficient internet access or the device required to review the samples. And then those pre-kindergarten samples, like we said, have to be viewed in person at TEA or the ESC. You have specific responsibilities related to the pre-adoption samples, and the first responsibility is that you have to decide and let us know who's responsible for supervising access to the samples. This is important because we will send notifications to each of you who have been designated as the contact to keep you up to date on different happenings and also reminders about upcoming deadlines. Next, you have to publish a public notice to share the dates and times that samples will be available for public viewing. We also need you to share that information with us because we include it on our ESC contact page. Once you review the samples, you must verify that once you receive the samples, you must verify that you can log into them using the credentials provided by the publisher, or in the case of those physical samples, you have to check them in, make sure you have all the components that you should have, and store them. If you're unable to log into the samples or you find that something's missing from the physical samples, you need to notify us so that we can help you resolve that issue with the publisher. And finally, you're responsible for ensuring public access to those samples, and that access must include a time that's outside of normal working hours. The requirement to provide electronic samples is fairly new, and it began with Proclamation 2014 for K-12 Science and K-8 Math. And we began actually posting the samples online with Proclamation 2017 for CTE and languages other than English. As those print samples are phased out, you can recycle them once the new materials are adopted. If you've posted access to the pre-adoption samples to your website, you have to remove it by the due date for post-adoption samples. And speaking of post-adoption samples, you'll receive another round of samples from the publishers after the materials are adopted and before they're made available to districts and EMAT. And we'll talk about the exact timeline for that a little bit later. But like the pre-adoption samples, K-12 samples will be electronic and pre-K samples will be in the format that will be offered to schools. So this issue of housing pre-K samples will not be limited just to those pre-adoption samples. It'll also be true for the life of the adoption. Post-adoption samples always have to be viewed in person, whether...
Amy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Did you say that we have to store those materials here through the whole life of the adoption?
Yes, ma'am, that's true.
Okay. So we don't get rid of them like we did in the past, you know, they were here through, I mean, do you mean like for the next 8 years until they're done again, or do you just mean through this cycle of approval and all that?
No, through the entire contract period. So as long as those materials are adopted and being used in schools, you'll have to keep those post-adoption samples. You will get to discard the pre-adoption samples, so you won't have two sets.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So as I was saying, the post-adoption samples have to be viewed in person, whether they're online or physical samples. And you shouldn't share those samples or login credentials on your website, nor should you provide any members of the public with the login credentials when they come in person. When we have somebody come to the agency if we're able to, we ask in advance what they want to view, and then we have the equipment set up and we'll physically log them into the samples. In addition, when we're talking about really digital or print materials, you shouldn't allow people to print or make copies of the materials. Now I'm going to jump into the specific deadlines that are included in current proclamations and tell you what's in each of the proclamations if you don't already know. So Proclamation 2019 included English and Spanish language arts and reading for middle school and elementary school, which included handwriting and spelling, and also one social studies course, personal financial literacy. Proclamation 2020 included the high school English courses, and as you know, 2021 includes English and Spanish pre-K systems. Proclamation 2022 hasn't been issued yet, but it's scheduled to include English and PE for all grade levels. Sometimes we don't get any submissions. Yes?
I'm going to interrupt because you just said English instead of health. And so I
my goodness,
wanted to make sure that nobody was confused.
Good catch. No, we're not doing English again. Health and PE for all grade levels. Thanks, Kelly. Sometimes we don't get submissions for courses that the SBOE included in a proclamation, or the SBOE chooses not to adopt one or more of the submissions we received. And so this list that you see here are courses for which we do not have any adopted materials, and that includes English Learners Language Arts, ESOL 1 and 2, English Language Development and Acquisition, 6th grade Spanish Language Arts and Reading, and elementary Spanish spelling. Most of the Proclamation 2020 deadlines have already passed, but you should plan on receiving post-adoption samples by May 8th, and those will all be digital samples. This is also the time that you can discard any print high school English samples that you may still be holding on to. In just about a month, you'll receive the pre-K kits that we've been talking about, and you'll have a week to go through those and notify us of any irregularities. Then you'll receive the final post-adoption kits by April 26th of next year. And at that time, as I mentioned earlier, you can discard the pre-adoption samples. And right before you receive the final pre-K samples next April, you'll also receive the pre-adoption versions of the Proclamation 2022 materials. And we'll again have a week to go through them and let us know if anything is missing or wrong. Then you'll receive the final post-adoption samples for Proclamation 2022 in March of 2022. There are lots of ways you can find information or get help. After our last meeting a couple years ago, we created a web, yes?
Are we supposed to be receiving post-adoption samples for Proclamation 2020?
Yes, ma'am, you are. So those will be the samples that include any corrections or edits that were made throughout the review and adoption process. And it'll really just be new login credentials. And in some instances, the publisher will just send you an email saying the original login credentials still work. They now, will direct you to the post-adoption sample, or you'll get a whole new batch.
We're not going to receive any physical samples.
No, ma'am. The only subject area where you're going to get physical samples is for Proclamation 2021 pre-K systems.
Can I ask a quick question? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Excuse me. Can we get a copy of the PowerPoint to be able to refer to?
Absolutely. We'll post copies of the slides and a recording of the webinar to the ESC portal.
Thank you so much.
Can I ask a question really quick on that slide that you were just on? Do you mind? Okay, thank you. So the pre-adoption samples, April 6, 2020, this is the material that's going to be sent to the service centers, right?
That's correct.
And okay, so remember, this is Tracy, the just getting involved here.
Yes.
So do you have an approximate size of how many, pallets or whatever is, because we're in the middle of a remodel and
Oh
you may have to
boy.
come home with me. So I'm just curious, what's the size of an adoption? Are you talking like, 2 pallets, 3 trucks, 4
Oh my goodness.
Freightliners?
I hope
What
we're
are we
not
talking?
talking
Do you
about
know?
pallets or trucks. I'm hoping that we are talking about a box or a couple boxes of materials. Now, because we haven't seen the samples yet, I can't say for sure. I can only speak to the samples that we currently have from previously adopted pre-K materials. And so we have 10 bilingual bids. So a kit that's being bid in English and Spanish, and it is yet to be seen whether it'll all be housed in one box or if it'll be an English box and a Spanish box. Then we have 6 that are only in English. So, and 1 that's only in Spanish. So at a maximum, you're talking about 17 kits from 15 publishers.
And then that notify TEA of irregularities, is that something that I'm going to have to go through these boxes and identify that?
The biggest issue is if you don't receive something. So that's the most common thing that would be a red flag, and for you to say, hey, TEA, I didn't get the sample from, fill in the blank publisher.
Okay. And then from 2020 to 2021, is that the window that we need to have these samples available for the public?
That's correct.
Okay. And then 2021, the new, fresh, updated samples will arrive the 26th, and then I can get rid of the ones that came in on April 6th of 2020.
That's exactly right.
Okay, but we need to have some place to have all the stuff laid out. And then do we set our own calendar of when we have it open, or do we say from 8 to 5 or whatever, or is there a minimum number of days we need to have it open?
Nope. There's no minimum number of days. You get to set your own schedule. The only requirement is that you have an opportunity outside of working hours, which of course could be by appointment only, for people to come who might not be able to make it between the hours of 8 and 5. And it's not like you guys have to have these samples set up on display in any kind of way. I mean, we have ours on a shelf in the basement. And if
we don't have a
somebody, I say basement, it's like the ground floor, but it feels like a basement. So, if you have a storage closet and, somebody wants to come, then of course you have to have the ability to pull out those materials and provide them with a space to review them. But you don't have to have like a library or some fancy place where all these samples are set up.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Hey, Amy.
No problem. Yes, ma'am.
This is Tara. I was wondering if we could be put on a group email since you've got everybody's email addresses, and then as things come in, if we see that things are missing or if I didn't get something, we can just kind of chat with the group. That way we are kind of doing that work together.
Well, what I can do is, yes, we have a document that has everybody's email addresses, so I can share that with the group. And then if you want to email the group, you'll have everyone's contact information handy.
Okay, and I was wondering if anyone in the past, because this is the first time I've had to have physical materials. It has been digital in the past. I haven't gone through this type before. We have a curriculum directors meeting about almost once every month. Sometimes it's once every 2 months. And we were thinking about setting up the materials in a room on the day that we have curriculum directors meetings so that they can look through them then. Or maybe having one day a month where we set up a room and have a session tied to it where people can come in and browse. I was wondering from the other people who have been in it a lot longer if they have done something similar or if it's just the hours that are on that chart.
I'm going to pause to give you guys a chance to respond if you have any thoughts or feedback about that idea. Well, maybe that's something that you can discuss further in the group email, but I will say that the once a month opportunity, I don't think would, you would also have to say, and by appointment, in case somebody, you know, that just happens to live in your region who has an interest in this adoption, who's not going to attend those meetings, would have the opportunity to review the materials.
I can add Region 13 in the last pre-K. Our level of samples that we had was huge, and we had them stored in a warehouse, and the people would come and they would make an appointment. They would come and be escorted in and be allowed to view the materials at the warehouse. Other adoptions where we had physical samples, we had them stored and we would put them on a cart and put them in a room, and the people would have to call in advance and make an appointment, and then we would escort them and set them up in a room for viewing.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I actually have another question. Are you guys going to send us a list of those 17 publishers that we should be watching for?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to show you after I get through the next slide or two where you can find this information and give you a little tour of some of the web pages.
Okay, perfect.
All right, so as I mentioned, we created the ESC portal to try to kind of combine all of the different bits and pieces that are relevant to ESC instructional materials staff in a one-stop shop. This is certainly a work in progress, so after you look at this page, if you feel like there's information that you would like to see added, please let us know, because we are happy to do so. We also have several other pages, like the instructional materials homepage, proclamations page, and review and adoption process page, that contain information that will help you understand more about the process and can often help you answer questions that you receive from the field about instructional materials and review and adoption. And if you don't find what you're looking for there, or if you just feel like phoning a friend, you can submit an instructional materials help desk ticket, or you can contact us by email or phone. And I'm never good at this, but I'm gonna try to swap out my screens to show you some of the information on those pages. So if you'll just bear with me for a moment. Also had to switch out my AirPods because they died. All right, let's see. Okay, so here is the ESC portal that I was talking about. And you can see that we've gathered a collection of resources, the adoption cycle, which is going to tell you when subject areas are scheduled to be included in a proclamation. You can access the current list of adopted instructional materials, contact information for publishers, contact information for each of the ESCs. And I'm going to go ahead and open that so you can see. This is where I was saying that we include your hours for review. So I would ask each of you to open that document, verify the information for your region, and if you see something that needs to be updated, then you should send that to us either through the help desk ticket or by email. We also have a document for pre and post-adoption sample status, and that's going to tell you what you should be doing with each of those samples and how they have to be reviewed. And so we try to keep this updated as we move into each new proclamation. Now, the instructional materials page, that has a quick and easy button to access the help desk. You can also sign up for our 2 different listservs, and then just a collection of kind of latest news or things that are happening now. And then each of the teams have their own section here with frequently visited links. Now the proclamations page, this is where you can actually go to access the list of publishers that are participating in each proclamation. And so each proclamation has its own page. I'm going to click on 2021 to show you that list of publishers with materials under consideration. This is essentially your checklist as you receive those samples, so that you can be sure that each publisher has submitted their kit for English and or Spanish, whatever is in this courses column. Then you have the review and adoption process page, which gives you an overview of each step in the process. And then finally, here's the instructional material help desk page. Now I'm going to switch it back to our presentation. Before we move on to the next part of the presentation, I'm just going to pause and see what other questions you guys have. And you can either just unmute yourself and ask the question aloud or enter it into the chat.
Do you want us to send you our Proclamation 2021 date so that it can be added to the chart?
Your showcase date?
Our showcase date, yes.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
What other questions do you have?
We need to reschedule our showcase date till after the adoption.
Do you need to schedule it after the adoption?
Well, we've already got it scheduled in November, basically same calendar frame we've done the last few years, but the adoption is actually scheduled for the week after our showcase.
Oh.
I mean, the state action on the adoption.
This is Kelly. I'm going to jump in here. I think it's fine to keep the date that you have, as long as you're very clear with people and with the whatever kinds of invitation or literature you're putting out, that this is not a final adopted list. These are products, at that time, they will be products under consideration for adoption. And I think it's just important to be very transparent about that. Doing that would be easier probably than rescheduling.
Okay, thank you.
And at that time, you will certainly have the review results from the summer review, so you'll know which of the materials on that list that I showed are eligible for adoption. What other questions do you have? I see one question that was entered into the chat, how are normal business hours defined? And I would just say to default to 8 to 5. Anything outside of those would be considered outside of normal business hours.
So Amy, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, but I actually typed in an answer to that question and your answer and my answer don't match.
Oh, shoot.
So if you can expand that box so you can see the questions that I've already answered, maybe we can avoid contradicting each other.
Well, why don't you provide the official answer then?
Well, what I said is that your ESC determines its normal business hours. For many ESCs, that's probably 8 to 5, but I don't know. Maybe you operate from 7 to 4, but that's a local agency decision.
I see another question. One of our districts has inquired if pre-K systems materials would apply to their half-day program for 3-year-olds. I think that the short answer is that's up to the district, but I will mention that the alignment to the Texas pre-kindergarten guidelines will be made to the end of year outcomes, for which in the guidelines are for end of year outcomes for 4-year-olds. So you could use the materials if, you know, a district could choose to do that, but the alignment will be to end of year outcomes. All right, any other questions before we move on? Okay. Our colleague, Melissa Lautenschlager, had hoped to be able to join us today to talk about the Texas Resource Review. Unfortunately, she is facilitating an offsite working group and is unable to join us. She has, however, shared her slide deck with me, so you're lucky to have me for a few more minutes, and I'll do my best to share the information with you guys. The Texas Resource Review, or TRR, exists to assist districts in selecting high-quality instructional materials by providing comprehensive and user-friendly information about the quality of instructional materials. They gather this information by working with teams of Texas educators who've been trained on the use of a Texas-specific quality rubric. The results of the quality reviews are already available for English 1 and 2 and will soon be available for K2 English Language Arts and Reading. You can access the results of the quality review and the rubrics on the TRR website, which I'll share with you in a moment. They're also developing tools and trainings to support districts as they work to adopt materials locally. You can access the quality review results and the rubrics at texasresourcereview.org. Melissa and her team are also working very hard to engage the public in reviewing the rubrics that will be used to review the quality of Spanish language arts and reading materials. In fact, that's why Melissa couldn't be here today, because she's facilitating a work group in El Paso. If you're interested, your ESC could co-host a feedback session with the TRR team, and they're also willing to visit districts or host virtual feedback sessions. Once the rubrics are developed, they're posted online for 30 days for public comment. The rubrics for pre-K, K-8 math, and foundational literacy for kindergarten through 2nd grade are already finalized. Those materials will be reviewed along with the pre-K materials that we're reviewing for alignment to the TPG this summer, and the reports will be published in November. This means that districts will have the results of the quality review in time to use them to inform local adoption decisions. Another way to get involved in the TRR is to be a quality reviewer. Applications for this position are due May 1st and require deep content knowledge and understanding of the standards. To recap this super quick presentation, there are several ways you can engage with the TRR. You can spread the word about the website to districts in your region, help with the development of the Spanish rubrics, apply or nominate someone to be a quality reviewer, or request the assistance of the TRR team for local adoptions. Since the TRR is not my area of expertise, I'm not prepared to answer any questions, but if you have them, you can send them directly to the TRR team at texasresourcereview@tea.texas.gov, or you can contact Melissa directly. Now, I'm not quite sure if our folks from Learning Ally have arrived. I'm going to defer to Kelly.
I believe they have. We will be, let's see.
Kelly, this is Terry. I'm here.
Hi, Terry. So I'm going to invite you to share your screen, but then I'm going to talk for a minute before I hand you the microphone. Okay, so we wanted to take this opportunity while we had you all here, not quite captive, but, you know, at least engaged, I hope, to introduce you to a new project that we're starting regarding instructional materials for students with reading disabilities or reading difficulties. We're very excited about this. You may be familiar already with Learning Ally, which provides high quality human-read audio books at all grade levels, including our adopted textbooks. But they also are going to be working with us on an outreach project this year. And so we wanted to give you, this won't take long, so I'm going to ask you to stick with us for just a few more minutes. We wanted to give you a little overview about that, and then I'll come back and probably make a little plea to you. Terry, it's all yours.
All right, thanks so much, Kelly. This is Terry Noland. I am VP of Educator Initiatives here at Learning Ally and live in the great state of Texas. I'm out here in Abilene. So we have actually, Learning Ally has been around for a long time, and actually we've done a lot of work in Texas over the years. Hopefully you may have heard of us at some point, but as Kelly mentioned, we're kind of embarking on what we're calling this new relationship with TEA because of some of the work that we're doing. So I just want to share those things with you and make sure that you're in the know, that we are providing you that firsthand knowledge of what's going on. And I do have to appreciate and give a thank you to Kelly for allowing us to be here and having this time to share with everyone. So once again, it'll be short, as Kelly mentioned, but we do want to update you on our Texas partnership with TEA. So the Texas and Learning Ally partnership, some of the things that this includes is we've got those memberships, what we call memberships, through that TEA funding for all K-12 public and charter schools in the state of Texas. And what that means with membership is you get access to quite a few different things. So that first thing is access to 80,000 human-read audiobooks. And all of that discussion that Amy just went over about all of those proclamations, those adopted lists, we ensure that those materials are in our library, and we work really hard to make sure that those are in that human-read format for students in the state of Texas. But we've also got the novels, the ELA anchor text, and those types of materials that students are reading as well as the fun stuff they like to read. There's also the ability for our schools to participate in what we call our reading programs. One of those programs I'll highlight called the Great Reading Games. It's actually a national contest that happens, but I'm going to tell you what, Texas shows up in huge numbers for our Great Reading Games. This year nationally we had 2,900 schools participate, and I will tell you that we award 120 schools with top honors, and more than half of those came from the state of Texas. So what's happening there is kids are reading, and they're reading with they're voracious readers when it comes to those reading programs, lots of incentives. Also, something else that's happening, which is a part of what Kelly was talking about, some of this new outreach that we're doing, is around our professional learning opportunities. So what we've realized with Learning Ally, it is a great resource. It's an audiobook tool that can be great to accommodate our students. However, it's more than just understanding how to push some buttons and hit play. We want to ensure that our educators are using the audiobook solution with the greatest level of fidelity in the classroom, helping them to understand what that looks like. How do we integrate into their daily instruction to ensure that we're creating this equity of access for all of our students? So these professional learning opportunities is where we're going to be making some pleas to you, and Kelly's going to address that at the end as well. And then another opportunity is access to our virtual Spotlight on Dyslexia conference. Now, this conference is held on June 5th, and we are partnering with TEA to provide Texas educators with access to this conference. Now, let me tell you, you get 16 CE credits by attending this conference, and we've got great thought leaders, subject matter experts that come and present their content. And it's live on June 5th, but you can get access until September 30th to watch all of the recordings. So as you can see, just through these few little bullets here, our partnership is more than just the a delivery of an audiobook. It's robust. We're working greatly on outreach and building relationships with schools and districts as well. So for those of you that may not know about the audiobook solution in its entirety, and helping to think about what it is, what your role is in making sure that you're providing those instructional materials to students, is that it is that proven effective accommodation and bridging students that have those learning differences to their cognitive level of ability, understanding. You've got a 6th grader that needs access to 6th grade science, to 6th grade math and history and the anchor text and just some fun reading, and that's what Learning Ally can do. Of course, it should never replace that explicit instruction, but being that bridge to that grade level content. It also helps you build a much more comprehensive dyslexia program and building in the supports for those students. And it's a personalized solution for those readers. I talked about that equity of access, building it in right into their classrooms for teachers to provide the instruction for those students that need it. So I love this slide, and mainly because I want you to look at those books. And, like I said, we've got the textbooks. We've got that material in our library. But you know what? You usually don't start a student with a textbook. You're going to start them with things that the other students are reading, things that are of interest to them, things that draw them in, and that's what our library does for students. And a book that's not listed here in the series is that one of our most popular series is the Dog Man series. For those early elementary readers, that graphic novel style, fun, engaging content, the Jeff Kinney books, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and then, by the time I get to high school, I've got to read things like The Outsiders, The Great Gatsby. So understanding that we have the entirety of what a student needs in their backpack, we can provide with that human narration. So picture on the screen there, and actually I hope I can do this here in a minute and actually take us to the app real quick, but our audiobooks work on any device. So your mobile devices, on PC, on Mac, on Chromebooks, things that students have in their hands. Also, the memberships allow students to gain access at home during the summer. We've got a summer reading program as well, and being able to access that content even when they're not at school. We've got built-in tools that help students build their vocabulary, comprehension, critical thinking skills. And you know what this does for kiddos? They've been separated from content. We all know this, that work in the area of instructional materials and providing those tools that students need is if a student can't get access to what everybody else is reading, it separates them not only from the content, it separates them from their friends, from the class, and we want to make sure that we're boosting their confidence, their self-esteem, and academic performance. We've got some great testimonials from schools, even here in Texas, that are showing great progress on outcomes related to the standardized testing, on benchmarks, on assessments as well. So also, we've got tools for educators, and I'll draw your attention there to that middle picture. So we have an online portal where educators can go in and track and monitor progress for their students. So this tool, you can see across the top of that screenshot on that computer, are all of these data points that show how students are progressing with their reading with Learning Ally. And it's a great motivator for students as well to know how many pages are read. All of that information is tracked in order for teachers to monitor progress, to encourage students. They can add books through this portal as well. So a great tool for educators and all of the analytics that they get back to help know that these students are reading content. Now, let me talk to you about eligibility here. There's 3 categories of eligibility, and those 3 categories are reading deficit, individuals that are blind or visually impaired, and students with other physical disabilities. So reading deficit, actually you'll see a guide that we have over there on the left-hand side, and this is available to all of our educators on our Texas landing page. And reading deficit, you do not need an IEP or a 504. Absolutely. Those students that have an IEP or 504 are great places to start looking. What reading deficit is defined as are those students that have those skill deficits that somebody that is a competent authority can come in and look at and say, yes, this student has discrepancies in the areas of decoding, fluency, or comprehension. And obviously blind or visually impaired, those are easy ones to identify. And other physical disability in this category, it can be students that can't hold a book, turn the pages of a book, but it could be also students that, suffer from chronic migraines or, during a duration of a concussion or something like that. Students could fall in that category. So we give support to our schools in helping them understand. We actually have an amazing team of outreach coordinators, success managers here in the state of Texas that work directly with schools to support them in understanding those things. So I want to take you, I talked a little bit about this educator experience where you have that portal that educators can log into. But I do want to show a real quick snippet of our audiobook experience. And let me get that pulled up for us here. All right, so this is an example of the audiobook app. And as you can see here, so this is a student, a middle school student, Andrea. Andrea actually is a student that has been diagnosed with dyslexia, and she is in 7th grade, but she decodes on a 3rd grade level. But we don't always want to be giving Andrea 3rd grade level content. That doesn't grow her as a student. It doesn't build her vocabulary, giving her that equitable access to grade level content. So as you can see here on her 7th grade bookshelf, we've got Discovering Careers. We've got Frightful's Mountain, which was one of her anchor texts. The book Wonder, because that's what her friends are reading. And down in the bottom row, you see things like Letter from Birmingham Jail. So we've got these primary source documents that are standalone documents that aren't embedded in some other book, because we know Letter from Birmingham Jail can be found in many textbooks and many reference materials. But we've got that as a standalone document in case Andrea needs access to that. We've got her 7th grade history book, one of those adopted texts. We've got her 7th grade science book as well. So this is what her bookshelf should look like as a 7th grade student. Now, I'm going to play a snippet because I want you to hear the human read audiobook aspect of what we do. And my hope is that it's going to come through and you'll be able to hear that. So I'm going to click into Wonder and just let us listen to a snippet.
If I found a magic lamp and I could have one wish, I would wish that I had a normal face that no one ever noticed at all. I would wish that I could walk down the street without people seeing me and then doing that look away thing. Here's what I think. The only reason I'm not ordinary is that no one else sees me that way. But I'm kind of used to how I look by now. I know how to pretend I don't see the faces people make. We've all gotten pretty good at that sort of thing. Me, Mom and Dad, Via. Actually,
all right, I'm going to stop right there. You know, what we did and what we do continually do is we make sure to match our readers with the tone, the texture of the book. And actually, this book, Wonder, was read by a younger boy, so we got his perspective. And what that does for our readers, here's the importance of the human read aspect of this audiobook, of this tool for our students that are those struggling readers, have reading deficits, is that it now takes away that process of having to decode. And now they're not struggling over the decoding process, and they can jump to comprehension. It's modeling what oral reading fluency is all about, what reading aloud should sound like, what it should feel like, and that modeling starts to happen for students. There's all kinds of integrated tools within the app as well. I can click in the top right-hand corner and make a note. And let's say that we are doing something about character development, and I can just make some notes here in this note-taking tool, click Save. And then down in the bottom left-hand corner, I'm able to go and navigate to the notes and bookmarks that I've taken within this book. So not only is the audiobook app for using and reading my books, it is an integrated learning tool that starts to take place for these students. I'm able to do my note-taking. I mean, we know working with students that are struggling readers, they've also sometimes have issues with executive functioning. And so, you know, making sure to have my paper and pen and keeping things organized. And now I can do all of those things right in the app and create that learning experience. Another cool feature I'll share with you is being able to have an integrated dictionary. I clicked on the word ordinary, and now it pulls up a couple of different definitions for me, depending upon the context, whether it's an adjective or a noun, and I can make that decision, whether in the context of this sentence, whether it was a adjective or a noun here, and I can highlight it, take notes on that vocabulary word, and start to create a vocabulary list. Once again, another very good integrated tool. I'll go down to the bottom left-hand corner and look at my vocabulary list. I've made a list of artifact, cheeks, ordinary, all of those words that could support me in that vocabulary development. All right, so that's a really quick view and vision into the app. There's some other cool features in here, but I just wanted to give you a little snippet of what we're able to do and experience with that audiobook app, which is a key element of what this TEA partnership is providing. So I'm going to go back to that PowerPoint presentation, and we got to see what that student experience was like through that app. I've discussed with you what that educator experience is all about. Once again, a screenshot here of the dashboard of what teachers would see and how to manage their students. All right, what I want to do now is I'm going to play this video here. And this is actually a school, it's Nola Dunn Academy in Burleson ISD. And this was a couple of years ago. These are students that participated in one of our reading programs, the Great Reading Games. And it's just a 1 minute, 41 second little snippet of the transformation that happens with Learning Ally. Oh, sorry, it's 3 minutes.
Something can be incredibly frustrating. I mean, you watch me here every morning trying to host a show. But for students in Burleson, a group of students, that something for them was reading.
They worked hard, though, to overcome their challenges. And as Sean Giggy shows us, the reward was pretty incredible. Here's today's KP Pulse.
Many teachers spend a life wondering if they've truly made a difference.
We're going to do one sentence at a time.
but not Dana Blackaby.
Okay, let's go.
Thanks in part to a gift given to her by a student.
There was a picture and it said, "I heart books." And I kept it because that's going to be one of my treasures.
Mrs. Blackaby is the dyslexia specialist here at the Academy at Nola Dunn in Burleson.
Page 7.
She says her students who are dyslexic love learning.
And let's go.
Even though for a while, what they really felt was tortured. Tortured by reading.
Kids that are dyslexic hate reading. It's hard. I was like the black sheep of the family because I couldn't read fast because everybody else in my family did. I saw a lot of them always be in their books and stuff. And it always be sad and stuff.
Dyslexia can be that damn. Over time, Mrs. Blackaby's students did show improvement. So much so that earlier this year, they took part in a national reading contest. The goal wasn't to win. Rather, it was to show just how far they'd come. Edgar Allan Poe lived in Baltimore. He wrote a contest required either in hard books or on a laptop to read as many pages as possible. And together, they read 134,000 pages in just 7 weeks, beating out 1,200 other schools to finish third. They were given laptops and other prizes for their school. But the greatest gift wasn't found in the pages of a book, but inside themselves.
It helps my confidence, helps everything.
These students may never grace a bestseller list, but they've already got one incredible story. John Gee.
Greg understands exactly just where those tears are coming from. You've seen it firsthand.
I'm going to show this to my daughter a little bit later, this story to her suffering from dyslexia. I know what it's like for those students to not have that confidence and seeing those tears. Space. I've seen that before, but I'm proud to say she has done great in reading. We've gotten her the help that she needs, and she has done great all year, so we're proud of her for overcoming that and dealing with that.
And don't you think, though, about the students who don't have the same means to be diagnosed early on and the help they need, because there really is no correlation between their ability to read early on and their IQ, because there is no young girl, no young woman smarter of her age than your daughter.
All right, thanks everybody for listening and watching that video. I just think it really pulls everything together about the impact that can be made when students get access to those materials in the format that they need in order to be successful. And those of you that are on the session today, you know, I know that your roles, many of you do not have that direct contact with students. So your role is more about ensuring that we are getting this information to those people, to those individuals in those schools, in those buildings, to make sure that Learning Ally is used far and wide. So the way that we want to make sure that happens is a couple of ways. I'm going to talk about our Texas landing page and then hand it over to Kelly real quick. Our Texas landing page, we have a specific page for this partnership with TEA, learningally.org/Texas. I encourage you to go there. There's resources, there's materials. There's also an application on that page for membership. Now, once again, this is all provided by TEA, so there is no expense directly to the school. What we are asking for is share this page. Also on this page, you heard Chad's voice come on. You'll see Chad's team listed on that page as well of the folks to reach out to. We have people that are here to support and make sure that schools are getting the best access, the most wonderful support to implement and make sure that we are infiltrating all of the schools that we can across the state. So with that, Kelly, I do want to hand it over to you for your comments.
Thank you so much, Terry. So as Terry mentioned, it's not your role to work directly with students with dyslexia, but you probably all have the experience to understand the seriousness of a student with reading disabilities of whatever sort, and Terry talked about several varieties. We want every teacher in Texas to know about this program. I would have loved to have known about this program when I was in the classroom. And I imagine that you guys all have connections with teachers that are more direct than the connections that we can have here at TEA. Learning Ally has developed a lot of really excellent professional development to help teachers understand how to implement their great tools in the classrooms and make a big difference in the lives of students. I am probably not talking to the person at each ESC who can help us distribute this news, although some of you may, because as somebody mentioned at the beginning, you all wear many different hats and do many different duties as assigned. But I'm hoping that our connection with you will help you connect us with somebody who can help us spread this news. And so whether that person is your curriculum coordinator, your reading specialist, whoever it is that we might be able to form a partnership with, we think it would be awesome if we were able to provide the professional development at all 20 ESCs. And again, I know that you can't wave your magic wand and help and make that happen at your ESC, but we're hoping that through you, and of course we're going through other avenues as well, we can connect with the people who might be able to help us make this professional development available to more teachers across the state. And so that's why we wanted to take this particular opportunity to introduce you to this. Besides, isn't it a great program? We just wanted you to hear about it because we want everybody to hear about it. So with that said, I will pause once again to see if anybody's come up with a question while we've been talking that you would like to ask before we close down for the day.
Yes, I have a question. So earlier, and I don't remember who actually mentioned this, but said that there were some requirements that had changed for the publishers. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what those are?
Amy, I believe that may be a question for you. Or are we talking about rule changes from Chapter 66?
Well, just whatever the changes are that pertain to publishers. I actually had a phone call from a publisher while I was sitting here on this webinar. So I just wanted to know, okay, is there something that they know that we don't know?
So one change that was made in the recent rule revisions is this one regarding pre-K kits, that they have to be provided to you and to us in a format that matches what will finally be available in classrooms. So that's one big change. Another big change is that the language for meeting TEKS didn't really seem to apply to the pre-K guidelines. And so the requirements for getting adopted for pre-K systems are a little different from those for K-12 products. They still have to meet 50% of the essential knowledge and skills. And in pre-K, that means 50% in each of the 10 domains. So it's not just 50% overall. But instead of the language that is appropriate for TEKS, the new language just for pre-K systems is that they have to meet 50% in the teacher material and as deemed appropriate in the student material. So we've gone through working with our early childhood division to identify which of those standards would be appropriately covered in student material and what that might look like. And so we've identified that for publishers. So it makes this proclamation, it's just one more thing that makes this proclamation a whole different animal from other proclamations. Amy, can you think of anything to add to that?
No, I was actually looking through the November SBOE attachment, particularly the changes made to 6628, which are the requirements for publisher participation. And I'm not seeing anything outside of what you've already discussed.
Okay, let me say one more thing that just occurred to me. Whereas publishers are required to provide you and us with complete full samples, they are not required to provide complete full samples to any district that requests them. In the past, or in other proclamations, publishers are required to provide electronic access to their pre-adoption samples to a district that requests it. But the idea of providing potentially 1,200 full pre-adoption kindergarten kits, pre-kindergarten kits it just wasn't feasible. So while they do have to provide us with that and you with that, they can provide upon request to districts an electronic sampling of their product. So that can be more of a preview of their product instead of that full kit. So that's a question you might hear come up from your districts or from a publisher.
Great, thank you so very much.
You bet. Any other questions? Okay, well then we're going to thank you so much for your time. We're all going to gain back 30 minutes of our day here because we didn't need the full 2 hours. But we really appreciate your being here, your attention, your excellent questions. And we will be following up with all of you with links to the recording and to the slides. And we look forward to hearing from you about other questions that you come up with, or your showcase dates, or any contact information that's been changed that we need to update on our website, and so on and so forth. Thank you all again so much, and have a great afternoon.